Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Deep. Joel Byers had spent 15 years perfecting the art of silence. Not just the operational silence required aboard the USS Leviathan, where even a dropped wrench could mean the difference between invisibility and detection, but the deeper silence of a man who had learned that words were weapons best kept sheathed until the moment demanded their edge. At 38, Joel commanded respect through presence rather than volume. His crew called him ice behind his back, not out of disrespect, but recognition of his unnerving calm under pressure. During the Iranian crisis 2 years prior, when hostile submarines had stalked them through the Strait of Hormuz, Joel had methodically outmaneuvered 3 enemy vessels while his captain slept, never once raising his voice above a whisper. The Leviathan was home in ways his house in Virginia Beach had never been. Here, 200 feet beneath the Pacific surface, every system had a purpose, every man had a role, and betrayal was impossible. The ocean itself would punish disloyalty with swift, merciless death. Joel's personal quarters were Spartan. A narrow bunk, a desk barely large enough for his charts, and a single photograph. The picture showed his wife Candy and their 16-year-old daughter Miranda at last year's Navy Christmas party. Candy's smile seemed forced even then, her auburn hair perfectly styled, green eyes focused somewhere beyond the camera. Miranda, however, beamed with genuine pride, wearing Joel's old Navy pin on her dress. Daddy's little sailor. He'd called her since she was 5. Miranda was the one person who could crack Joel's legendary composure, the only soul he'd ever loved without reservation or strategy. His marriage to Candy had been different, calculated from the start. They'd met during shore leave in San Diego 7 years ago. She was beautiful, charming, and ambitious, working as a real estate agent with dreams of bigger things. Joel recognized her type. Someone who viewed marriage as advancement, not partnership. But she was also magnetic, the kind of woman who turned heads and sparked envy. For a man who spent months underwater, having such a wife waiting ashore felt like a trophy earned. Their courtship was brief, professional almost. Candy admired his rank and potential for promotion. Joel appreciated her social skills and the way she managed their household during his long deployments. Love, if it existed, was convenient rather than consuming. Miranda changed everything. From the moment Joel held his newborn daughter, he understood what people meant when they spoke of unconditional love. She became his anchor to the surface world, the reason he counted days until shore leave, the face that appeared in his mind during the longest, darkest patrols. Now, 3 weeks into their current deployment, Joel was reviewing sonar patterns when Communications Officer Preston Nolan approached with unusual hesitation. "Sir," Preston's voice carried an odd tension. "Priority communication for you. Personal emergency." Joel's blood temperature dropped 2 degrees. His physical response to potential crisis, developed through years of submarine service. He followed Preston to the communications bay, noting how the younger officer avoided eye contact. The encrypted line crackled as Joel accepted the handset. "This is Lieutenant Commander Byers." "Joel." Candy's voice, but wrong somehow. Higher pitched, almost breathless. "Thank God. You need to know, Miranda's in the hospital. Critical condition." The words hit like depth charges, distant but devastating. "What happened?" "Accident at home. Head trauma." "Joel, it's bad. Really bad." "The doctors." Her voice broke, but underneath the sobbing, Joel detected something his trained ear couldn't quite identify. Captain Stuart Barr materialized beside him, having monitored the emergency channel. "Son, we're in contested waters. Can't surface for 3 days minimum." "I understand, sir." Joel's voice remained steady even as his world tilted. "Candy, I need details. How did it happen?" The line carried ambient hospital sounds, monitors beeping, distant conversations. Then Candy's voice again, but not directed at the phone. "Thank God, his coward dad isn't here to complicate things." Joel's grip on the handset tightened. The words were clearly audible, meant for someone else in the room. Before he could respond, a new voice joined the call. "Sir, this is Dr. Elias Davidson. Your daughter was found unconscious with severe head trauma. We're monitoring for brain swelling, but the next 48 hours are critical." "Found? Where's she found?" Background noise shifted, and Joel heard a third voice, official professional. "The neighbor saw someone leaving your house around the time we estimate the incident occurred." The line went dead. Joel stood motionless for 30 seconds, processing data like the submarine's tactical computer. Candy's strange tone, her comment about him being a coward dad, the mention of someone leaving the house, the timing. Preston watched nervously as Joel handed back the handset. "Sir, orders. Maintain current heading and depth." Joel's voice carried the same calm authority he used during combat drills. "Continue mission parameters." But inside, beneath the professional mask, something fundamental had shifted. Joel Byers had spent 15 years learning that the ocean punished deception and disloyalty without mercy or forgiveness. Now, it seemed, the surface world required similar lessons. As he returned to his quarters, Joel began calculating. Not torpedo trajectories or sonar triangulations, but something far more personal and infinitely more dangerous. If his family was in crisis, he would respond with the same methodical precision he brought to underwater warfare. The photograph on his desk showed Miranda's trusting smile. Whatever had happened to his daughter, whoever was responsible, they had made a critical error in judgment. They had threatened Joel Byers' anchor to the world above. Chapter 2. Surface Tension. 72 hours passed like depth charges in slow motion. Joel maintained his duties with mechanical precision, but every spare moment was spent in his quarters, staring at Miranda's photograph and replaying that phone call. The more he analyzed Candy's words and tone, the more discrepancies emerged. Preston Nolan entered without knocking, a privilege Joel had granted only to the communications officer during emergencies. "Sir, another call. Your wife again." Joel followed him back to communications, noting how the crew parted slightly as he passed. Word had spread about Miranda's condition, and submarine crews were like small towns. Everyone knew everyone's business. "Candy." Joel's voice remained controlled. "Joel, thank God. Miranda's stable, but still unconscious. The doctors say." Her voice carried the same strange breathiness as before. "Look, there's something else. Stanley Pearson from your old unit called. Said he wanted to help during this difficult time." Joel's blood turned arctic. Stanley Pearson, a man he'd served with 5 years ago, before Joel's promotion and transfer. Pearson had been cashiered from the Navy for conduct unbecoming, specifically for attempting to seduce officers' wives during deployments. The fact that Candy even knew Stanley's name sent alarm signals through Joel's tactical mind. "I don't remember giving you Stanley's contact information. He found me through social media. Wanted to offer support." Another pause, then Candy's voice again, not directed at the phone. "Don't worry, he's still underwater for 2 more days." This time, Joel was certain. Candy thought the line was muted or disconnected. She was speaking to someone else, someone she was reassuring about his location and availability. "Candy, who's with you?" "What?" "Oh, just hospital staff." "Joel, I need to go. The doctor wants to run more tests." "Wait, I want to speak with Dr. Davidson again." "He's not available. I'll call tomorrow." The line went dead again, but this time Joel was ready. He'd been recording the conversation on his personal device, a habit developed during intelligence briefings. Preston lingered nearby, clearly wanting to offer comfort, but uncertain how to approach his notoriously self-contained superior officer. "Preston, I need a favor. Personal, not operational." "Of course, sir. Contact your brother, the one who works for Virginia Beach PD. I need information about an incident report filed 3 days ago. My address." Discreetly, Preston nodded, understanding the gravity. Joel's brother Marcus was a detective with connections throughout the Virginia Beach law enforcement community. 6 hours later, Preston returned with a printout that made Joel's suspicions crystallize into cold certainty. The incident report was sparse but revealing. Miranda Byers, age 16, found unconscious in her bedroom by her mother. Head trauma consistent with a fall downstairs. "Mother, Candace Byers, stated she'd been at work during the incident. No witnesses, no signs of forced entry. But the neighbor's statement, buried in the supplemental reports, told a different story. Mrs. Jennifer Ball, age 67, reported seeing a man leave the Byers residence approximately 30 minutes before the ambulance arrived. Description: Caucasian male, approximately 40 years old, medium build, driving a blue pickup truck. Joel cross-referenced the description with his mental files on Stanley Pearson. The age, build, and vehicle type matched perfectly. Sir, Preston waited for orders. Send a message to your brother. I need everything he can find on Stanley Pearson. Current address, vehicle registration, employment history. Everything. Sir, we're still 2 days from port. I know exactly how long we have. Joel's voice carried a new edge, something Preston had never heard before. And I need that time of plan. Alone in his quarters, Joel spread his charts across the desk. Not navigational charts, but floor plans of his house that he drew from memory. He marked sight lines, entry points, and the exact location where Miranda would have been found. The stairs from Miranda's second-floor bedroom to the main level had a landing halfway down. If someone had pushed her, the trajectory would be wrong for the injuries described. But if someone had struck her in her room and then arranged her body at the base of the stairs, Joel's analytical mind processed the scenario with the same clinical detachment he used for combat assessments. Miranda had discovered something, either Candy and Stanley in a compromising position or evidence of their relationship. Stanley had panicked, struck her harder than intended, and they'd staged the scene to look like an accident. The comment about him being a coward dad now made perfect sense. Candy was reassuring Stanley that Joel wouldn't complicate their cover story because he was trapped underwater, unable to investigate or interfere. They had made 2 critical errors. First, they'd underestimated Joel's ability to gather intelligence from beneath the ocean. Second, they'd hurt Miranda. Joel opened his laptop and began typing. Not official Navy communications, but personal messages to contacts accumulated over 15 years of military service. Men who owed him favors. Men who shared his code about family and loyalty. Men who understood that some debts could only be paid in blood. By the time the Leviathan surfaced in San Diego, Joel would have assets in place. Surveillance on Candy and Stanley. Financial records. Employment histories. Personal weaknesses and vulnerabilities. The ocean had taught Joel patience, precision, and the value of overwhelming force applied at exactly the right moment. In 48 hours, Stanley Pearson and Candace Byers would discover that betraying Joel's daughter was the last mistake they would ever make. As he worked, Joel felt the familiar calm descend, the same state of focused clarity that had made him legendary among submarine crews. This was just another tactical problem requiring surgical solutions. Miranda's photograph watched from the desk as her father planned war. Chapter 3: Depth Analysis. The Leviathan broke surface under a gray San Diego dawn, water cascading from her hull like tears from a steel whale. Joel stood on the conning tower, breathing his first surface air in 3 weeks, tasting salt and freedom and the metallic edge of impending violence. His encrypted phone buzzed with messages accumulated during their ascent. 3 were from Candy, each more frantic than the last. 2 were from Marcus Nolan, Preston's detective brother. The final message came from a number Joel recognized, Garrett McDonald, his former master chief, now running private security in Virginia Beach. Garrett's message was characteristically brief. Package delivered. Sugar confirmed. All hands ready. Sugar. Mint surveillance was in place. Joel's network was operational. Preston approached with final communication logs. Sir, your brother-in-law called the boat directly. Says Miranda woke up yesterday, but isn't speaking yet. Doctors are cautiously optimistic. Relief flooded through Joel's chest, the first genuine emotion he'd allowed himself in 3 days. Miranda was alive, conscious, probably going to recover fully. But the fact that she wasn't speaking suggested trauma beyond physical injury. She'd seen something, remembered something. Joel's phone rang. Candy, calling right on schedule. Joel, thank God you're back on surface. When will you be home? Flying out tonight. How's Miranda? Better. She's awake now. and the doctors think she'll make a full recovery. It's such a relief. Candy's voice carried genuine emotion for the first time since this began. Maternal instinct, perhaps, or fear that her daughter might remember inconvenient details. I want to speak with her. She's still pretty out of it. Maybe when you get home. Candy. Joel's voice dropped to the register his crew knew meant absolute authority. Put my daughter on the phone. Now. A pause, then rustling sounds. Miranda's voice came through, weak but unmistakably hers. Daddy. The single word nearly shattered Joel's composure. Hey, little sailor. How are you feeling? Tired. My head hurts. A pause. Daddy, something happened. I know, sweetheart. We'll talk when I get home. Okay? Just rest. Mom says I fell down the stairs, but Miranda's voice faded as the phone was clearly taken away. She's exhausted, Candy said back on the line. The medication makes her confused. Doctor says memory issues are normal with head trauma. But Joel had heard what he needed. Miranda's tone carried the same uncertainty as his sonar operators when they detected something that didn't match their instruments. She knew the official story was wrong. I'll be home tomorrow morning, Joel said. Don't let anyone else visit until I arrive. Of course. Joel, I'm so sorry this happened while you were away. I feel terrible that I wasn't home to prevent it. Joel disconnected without responding. Candy's performance was improving, but she was still an amateur playing against a professional. The flight to Norfolk Naval Base gave Joel 8 hours to review the intelligence Garrett had compiled. Stanley Pearson, 42, dishonorably discharged from the Navy, currently unemployed, but living beyond his apparent means in a rented house 3 miles from Joel's residence. Vehicle registration confirmed. Blue Chevrolet pickup, license plate matching the neighbor's partial description. More interesting was the timeline Garrett had reconstructed through security cameras and cell phone towers. Stanley's phone had pinged towers near Joel's house 17 times in the past month, always during Joel's deployment. The pattern suggested regular visits, not chance encounters. But the most damning evidence was photographic. Garrett's surveillance team had captured images of Stanley leaving Joel's house the morning of Miranda's accident, approximately 25 minutes before Candy called 911. His expression was clearly visible: panic, guilt, and fear. Joel studied the photograph as his plane descended toward Norfolk. Stanley Pearson looked exactly like what he was, a man who had just made a catastrophic mistake and was desperately hoping to escape consequences. He was about to learn that Joel Byers never left consequences to chance. Garrett met Joel at the airport, a mountain of a man with scarred hands and eyes that had seen too much combat to retain illusions about human nature. Situation's worse than we thought, Garrett said without preamble as they walked to his car. Your wife's been careful, but not careful enough. Financial records show she's been paying Stanley's rent for 3 months. Credit card receipts put them together at hotels during your deployments. How long? Best guess. 6 months minimum. Maybe longer. Joel absorbed this information like tactical data. The betrayal was extensive, well-established, and apparently confident enough that they'd grown careless. That overconfidence would be their downfall. What's your assessment of Miranda's situation? Garrett's expression darkened. She walked in on them. Had a half. Stanley panicked, hit her harder than he intended. Then they staged the fall. If your daughter hadn't survived, but she did. Joel's voice carried the finality of a torpedo lock. And she's going to remember everything. As they drove toward Virginia Beach, Joel outlined his plan. It was comprehensive, merciless, and completely legal, at least on the surface. Joel had learned from the best submarine commanders that the most effective attacks were the ones the enemy never saw coming. By the time Candy and Stanley realized they were under assault, it would be far too late to mount any defense. Joel Byers was coming home, and he was bringing the full weight of 15 years of military training, tactical expertise, and carefully cultivated ruthlessness. The war was about to begin. Chapter 4. Home Invasion. Joel's house looked exactly as he'd left it 3 weeks ago. Colonial revival architecture, manicured lawn, the kind of suburban perfection that concealed more secrets than it revealed. But now he saw it through tactical eyes. Sightlines, entry points, defensive positions. His home had become a battlefield. Candy's BMW sat in the driveway beside a vehicle Joel didn't recognize. A silver Honda with temporary tags. Rental car, probably for Stanley, suggesting they were being more careful about his truck being spotted. Joel parked across the street and spent 10 minutes observing. Through the living room window, he could see movement, two figures in what appeared to be intense conversation. Candy gesturing emphatically, a man's silhouette responding with defensive body language. They were arguing about something, probably about Joel's imminent arrival and how to handle Miranda's potential memories. Garrett's voice crackled through Joel's earpiece. Overwatch confirms one adult male inside. Matches Pearson's description. 2 vehicles in the garage. Back exit is clear, front door only approach. Joel had positioned Garrett and 2 other former military contractors in observation points around the neighborhood. Not for violence, not yet, but for intelligence and insurance. Everything that happened from this moment would be documented, recorded, and preserved for later use. Joel approached his own front door like an insertion operation, silent, purposeful, with every sense alert for changes in the environment. His key turned soundlessly in the lock, a skill developed during surprise inspections aboard submarines. The conversation inside stopped the moment he stepped into the foyer. "Joel." Candy's voice carried manufactured surprise. "You're early." Flight was ahead of schedule. Joel's voice remained neutral as he assessed the scene. Stanley Pearson stood near the living room window, nervous energy radiating from his posture. He was exactly as Joel remembered. Average height, soft around the middle, the kind of man who relied on charm because he lacked substance. "Stanley." Joel's acknowledgement was clinical. "Unexpected to see you here. I wanted to offer support during this difficult time." Stanley's voice carried forced casualness. "Candy and I served together at the base social events. We're friends." Joel noted the carefully neutral language. No admission of personal relationship, no indication of intimacy. They'd rehearsed this encounter. How thoughtful. "Where's Miranda?" "Resting upstairs," Candy said quickly. "Doctor's orders. She shouldn't be disturbed." "I'll be gentle." Joel moved toward the stairs with the steady pace of a man accustomed to command. Neither Candy nor Stanley attempted to stop him. Too obvious, too revealing of their desperation to control access to Miranda. Miranda's room was dim, curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. She lay in her bed, awake but staring at the ceiling with the unfocused gaze of someone still processing trauma. "Hey, little sailor." Joel's voice softened as he sat beside her bed. Miranda turned toward him, and Joel saw intelligence behind the exhaustion. His daughter was thinking, remembering, trying to piece together fragments of a shattered experience. "Daddy." Her voice was stronger than it had been on the phone. "I'm glad you're home." "Me too. How are you feeling?" "Better. But..." Miranda glanced toward the door, then leaned closer. "Mom says I fell down the stairs, but I remember being in my room. I remember arguing voices downstairs, then coming down to see what was wrong." Joel kept his expression neutral while his tactical mind processed this information. "What do you remember about coming downstairs?" "Mom and a man were in the living room. They were close. Too close. I said something, and the man got angry. He grabbed my arm, and I tried to pull away." Miranda's voice faltered. That's when everything went black. Every detail confirmed Joel's tactical assessment. Miranda had surprised them. Stanley had panicked and struck her. Then they'd moved her to the base of the stairs to support their cover story. "Miranda, this is important. Do you remember the man's face?" "I think so. He had dark hair, kind of chubby. I'd seen him before. He came by when you were deployed." Miranda's eyes sharpened with sudden clarity. "Daddy, Mom lied about what happened, didn't she?" Joel felt the last vestige of doubt evaporate. His 16-year-old daughter had provided eyewitness testimony that would destroy Candy and Stanley's deception completely. "Yes, she did. But we're going to fix that." Joel squeezed Miranda's hand. "I need you to rest now, but tomorrow we're going to have some important conversations with some people who will want to hear exactly what you remember." "Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetheart. You're the victim here, and you're also the hero. You're going to help make sure the right people face consequences for what they did." Joel kissed Miranda's forehead and returned downstairs, where Candy and Stanley waited with transparent anxiety. "How is she?" Candy asked. "Recovering well. Her memory seems to be coming back." Joel watched both their faces carefully. Stanley's complexion went pale. Candy's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That's good," Stanley said. "Head trauma can be tricky. Sometimes people remember things that didn't actually happen." Joel smiled, the same expression he wore when enemy submarines revealed their positions. "Miranda's always been very observant. Accurate, too. She takes after her father that way." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Joel was letting them know that their deception was blown, their cover story compromised, and their time was running out. "Well," Stanley said, moving toward the door with obvious haste, "I should let you family have some time together. Candy, call if you need anything." Joel watched through the window as Stanley departed, noting that he drove the silver Honda rather than his registered pickup truck. Still being careful, still hoping to avoid detection. But it was far too late for caution. "I'm exhausted," Candy announced. "I think I'll take a bath and turn in early." "Good idea." Joel's voice remained pleasant. "Tomorrow's going to be a very busy day." As Candy retreated upstairs, Joel activated his encrypted phone and sent a single message to Garrett. "Operation approved. Execute Phase 2. The war had officially begun." Chapter 5. Intelligence Gathering. Joel rose at 0500 hours, a habit ingrained by 15 years of military discipline. He moved through his morning routine with mechanical precision while Candy slept. Coffee, shower, review of overnight intelligence reports from Garrett's team. The surveillance had been productive. Stanley Pearson had spent the previous evening at his rental house, making numerous phone calls and consuming significant quantities of alcohol. His behavior suggested a man under extreme stress, making increasingly desperate decisions. More importantly, Garrett's technical specialist had successfully installed monitoring devices in both Stanley's house and his vehicles during the night. Every conversation, every phone call, every movement would now be recorded and analyzed. Joel's secure laptop displayed a real-time feed from Stanley's kitchen, where the man was currently pacing while speaking on his phone to someone identified as Bernice, Stanley's sister in Richmond. "I'm telling you, this whole thing is falling apart," Stanley's voice came through clearly. "The husband's back, and the kid is remembering things. Kenny thinks we can ride it out, but I'm not so sure." Joel increased the volume as Bernice's voice responded. "Stanley, you need to get out of there. This was stupid from the beginning. Messing around with a Navy officer's wife? What were you thinking? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The girl wasn't supposed to get hurt. But she did get hurt, and now you're looking at assault charges if she talks. Maybe attempted murder if they decide it wasn't an accident." Joel saved the recording and immediately forwarded it to Marcus Nolan, Preston's detective brother. This conversation alone would provide probable cause for arrest warrants, but Joel wanted more than arrests. He wanted total destruction. Upstairs, Candy was stirring. Joel heard the shower running, her daily routine beginning. He had perhaps 30 minutes before she came downstairs, 30 minutes to review his daughter's testimony with a clear, objective mind. Miranda appeared in the kitchen at 0630, moving carefully but independently. The head trauma was healing faster than expected, another indication that the injuries had been inflicted by an amateur who'd panicked rather than someone with genuine intent to cause permanent harm. "How do you feel about talking to some police officers today?" Joel asked as he poured orange juice for both of them. Nervous but ready, Miranda's voice carried determination that made Joel proud. "I want to tell the truth about what happened. The truth is all we need." Candy emerged 20 minutes later, dressed for success in a sharp business suit and carrying her real estate portfolio. Maintaining normalcy, keeping up appearances. "I have 3 showings today," she announced. "Miranda, stay home and rest. Joel, maybe you could take some leave to help with her recovery?" "Already arranged. I'll be staying close to home for the foreseeable future." Something in Joel's tone made Candy pause, her real estate smile faltering slightly. She was beginning to sense that the dynamics had shifted, that her control over the situation was slipping. That's good." Families should stick together during difficult times. After Candy left, Joel made 2 phone calls. The first was to Detective Elias Davidson, not the doctor from the hospital, but Marcus Nolan's partner in the Virginia Beach Police Department's Special Victims Unit. Davidson specialized in domestic violence and family assault cases, with a particular expertise in situations involving staged accidents. The second call was to Lieutenant Roberto Marks, Joel's former executive officer and current JAG Corps attorney. Roberto had left active duty to practice civilian law, but maintained his security clearance and his connections within the military justice system. Both men agreed to meet at Joel's house that afternoon to interview Miranda and review the evidence Garrett had compiled. Joel spent the morning with his daughter, helping her prepare for the interview while simultaneously gathering additional intelligence on Stanley's background. The picture that emerged was of a man with a pattern of predatory behavior toward military wives, financial problems, and a history of violence when confronted with consequences for his actions. At 1,400 hours, Detective Davidson and Attorney Marks arrived simultaneously, followed by Garrett's unmarked surveillance van. Joel's living room transformed into a command center, with recording equipment, legal documents, and tactical communications. Miranda's interview was devastating for Candy and Stanley's defense. She described the scene in clinical detail. Her mother embracing a man she recognized from previous visits, her confrontation with him, Stanley's violent response, and her certainty that the fall down the stairs was staged after she'd lost consciousness. This is textbook assault with intent to cover up adultery, Davidson concluded. Combined with the surveillance evidence and phone recordings, we have multiple felony charges. What's the timeline for arrests? Joel asked. I can have warrants by tomorrow morning, but I want to coordinate with the district attorney's office to ensure we're maximizing charges. This isn't just assault. It's conspiracy, false reporting, insurance fraud if they file claims, and potentially attempted murder if we can prove intent. Roberto reviewed the legal implications while Garrett provided additional surveillance footage. The case was solid, overwhelming, completely devastating for both defendants. But Joel wasn't satisfied with legal justice alone. I need them to understand the full scope of their mistake, Joel said quietly. Prison sentences are just the beginning. Davidson and Roberto exchanged glances, recognizing the tone of a man who had calculated beyond conventional justice. Joel, Roberto said carefully, whatever you're planning, make sure it stays within legal boundaries. These people aren't worth compromising your career or freedom. Joel's smile was arctic. Everything I'm planning is completely legal, but that doesn't mean it will be merciful. As the meeting concluded, Joel activated his next phase, financial warfare. By evening, both Candy and Stanley would discover that their credit had been destroyed, their employment terminated, and their assets frozen pending criminal investigation. The submarine had surfaced, and Joel Byers was bringing the full weight of his network to bear against the people who had dared to hurt his daughter. Chapter 6. Battle Stations. The arrest occurred at dawn, synchronized with military precision. Detective Davidson took Stanley at his rental house, while a separate unit arrested Candy at her real estate office. Joel observed both operations from Garrett's mobile command center, watching as his wife and her lover learned that their world had collapsed overnight. Stanley offered no resistance, seeming almost relieved that the charade was finally over. Candy fought like a cornered animal, demanding lawyers, claiming innocence, insisting that this was all a misunderstanding that could be resolved through rational conversation. Neither understood that rational conversation had ended the moment they decided to hurt Miranda. Joel's phone buzzed with a call from Roberto Marks. Both suspects are in custody. Stanley's already talking. Apparently, he wants to make a deal. Candy's demanding a high-end criminal attorney and claiming she's the victim of a vindictive husband. What's Stanley offering? Full confession to the assault in exchange for reduced charges. He's claiming it was accidental, that he never intended to hurt Miranda seriously. Says Candy pressured him into staging the fall to avoid investigation. Joel processed this information tactically. Stanley was attempting to save himself by sacrificing Candy. Predictable behavior from a man who'd already demonstrated cowardice and poor judgment. What about Candy's position? denying everything. Claims Stanley was just a friend offering support, that Miranda's memory is compromised by head trauma, that you're orchestrating this because you want custody in a divorce. Interesting strategy, considering the surveillance evidence. Her attorney seems confident they can create reasonable doubt. Rich suburban housewife versus dishonorably discharged ex-Navy with a history of violence. Jury sympathy could favor her if they can discredit Stanley's testimony. Joel's smile was predatory. Candy's legal strategy revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of the battlefield. She was fighting a conventional war, while Joel had already deployed unconventional weapons. Roberto, what's the maximum possible sentence if both are convicted on all charges? Stanley's looking at 8 to 12 years. Kenny could get 5 to 8, possibly more if we can prove conspiracy and premeditation. Not enough. Joel, that's substantial prison time. Prison is temporary. What I have planned is permanent. Joel disconnected and activated Phase 3 of his operation. Over the next 6 hours, a carefully orchestrated campaign would destroy both Stanley and Candy's ability to rebuild their lives after incarceration. First, social media warfare. Garrett's cyber specialist unleashed a coordinated release of evidence across multiple platforms. Security footage of Stanley leaving Joel's house. Audio recordings of his confession to his sister. Financial records showing Candy's payments to Stanley. Medical records documenting Miranda's injuries. Within hours, the story had gone viral. Navy wife's affair leads to daughter's assault. Local news stations picked up the story, followed by regional outlets, then national coverage. Candy's real estate company immediately terminated her employment to avoid association with the scandal. Stanley's few remaining friends and family members began publicly distancing themselves. Second, financial destruction. Joel's military contacts included specialists in economic warfare, men who understood how to dismantle someone's financial life without leaving fingerprints. Candy discovered that her credit cards had been canceled, her bank accounts frozen pending investigation, and her professional licenses suspended. Stanley found himself evicted from his rental house and unable to secure employment due to his rapidly expanding criminal record. Third, social isolation. Joel had maintained relationships with the wives of other military officers throughout his career, women who understood the unique challenges of deployment marriages and the absolute importance of family loyalty. A whisper campaign began, spreading through military communities across the country. Candy Byers had betrayed her husband's trust and endangered her own daughter for the sake of an affair. The social consequences were devastating. Military communities were small, interconnected networks where reputation was everything. Candy would never again be welcome at base functions, military social events, or anywhere that Navy families gathered. But Joel's masterstroke was psychological warfare, targeting their deepest fears and insecurities. For Stanley, Joel arranged for certain information to reach other inmates at the county jail, specifically that Stanley had assaulted a teenage girl. In prison hierarchies, crimes against children occupied the lowest rung. Stanley would spend his incarceration in protective custody, isolated and terrorized by the knowledge that every other inmate considered him legitimate prey. For Candy, Joel's campaign was more subtle but equally devastating. He systematically contacted every client she'd worked with over the past 2 years, every professional association she belonged to, every social connection she'd cultivated. The message was consistent. Candy Byers was a woman who betrayed trust, who chose personal gratification over family loyalty, who couldn't be relied upon in any capacity. By evening, both Stanley and Candy had learned that their arrests were merely the beginning of their punishment. The legal system would confine them temporarily, but Joel's retribution would follow them for the rest of their lives. Miranda watched the news coverage from her bedroom, still recovering, but alert enough to understand that her father was systematically destroying the people who had hurt her. "Daddy," she asked when Joel came to check on her, "is this really necessary? They're already going to prison." Joel sat beside her bed, his expression softening for the only person who could still reach his humanity. "Sweetheart, some people understand mercy. Others only understand overwhelming force. Your mother and Stanley made a choice when they decided to hurt you. Now, they get to live with the consequences of that choice forever. Will we be okay? We'll be better than okay. We'll be free of people who don't deserve our trust or loyalty. As Miranda drifted off to sleep, Joel returned to his command center. Tomorrow would bring the final phase of his operation, the psychological breaking point that would ensure Stanley Pearson and Candy Byers never again posed a threat to anyone Joel cared about. The submarine commander had surfaced completely, and his enemies were about to discover that Joel Byers' capacity for strategic patience was matched only by his capacity for absolute, merciless revenge. Chapter 7. Full Assault. Joel stood in the courthouse corridor, watching through reinforced glass as Stanley Pearson shuffled toward the defendant's table in chains and orange jumpsuit. 3 days in county jail had transformed Stanley from nervous confidence to barely contained terror. His face carried the pallor of a man who discovered that his fellow inmates considered child assault an unforgivable crime. He's asking for solitary confinement, Detective Davidson informed Joel. Claims other prisoners are threatening him. What did you tell him? That protective custody is earned, not guaranteed. He needs to demonstrate good faith cooperation with our investigation. Joel's smile carried no warmth. Stanley's desperation was exactly where Joel wanted him. Psychologically broken, socially isolated, and willing to do anything to minimize his suffering. Candy entered the courtroom with her high-priced attorney, a silver-haired shark named Oliver Lockwood, who specialized in defending wealthy defendants against embarrassing charges. She'd managed to make bail through her family's money, but the 3 days in custody had stripped away her veneer of suburban sophistication. Dark circles under her eyes, nervous fidgeting, constant glances toward the gallery where Joel sat with Miranda. Roberto Marx approached with final updates. Stanley's attorney is pushing hard for a plea bargain. Full confession, complete cooperation, testimony against Candy in exchange for minimum sentencing. The DA's considering it. And Candy's position? Still claiming innocence. Lockwood thinks he can convince a jury that Stanley acted alone, that Candy was as much a victim as Miranda. Joel studied his wife's profile as she conferred with her attorney. Candy still believed she could manipulate her way out of consequences, that her charm and social status would overcome evidence and testimony. She was about to learn otherwise. Your Honor, the prosecutor began, the state has additional evidence that has come to light since the defendant's arrest. Joel watched as Garrett entered the courtroom carrying a sealed evidence box. Inside were recordings, photographs, and financial documents that would obliterate any remaining doubt about Candy's guilt. The prosecutor activated a digital display showing bank records. Mrs. Byers has been financially supporting Mr. Pearson for 6 months, paying his rent, utilities, and personal expenses totaling over $15,000. Additionally, cell phone records show 347 calls between the defendants during Lieutenant Commander Byers' deployment. Candy's face drained of color as each piece of evidence destroyed her claims of innocence. The financial support proved premeditation. The phone records demonstrated ongoing conspiracy. Together, they painted a picture of calculated betrayal rather than momentary weakness. Furthermore, the prosecutor continued, we have surveillance footage from the defendant's neighborhood showing Mr. Pearson's vehicle at the Byers' residence on 17 separate occasions during the past month, always during business hours when Mrs. Byers should have been at work. Stanley's attorney raised his hand desperately. Your Honor, my client wishes to formally accept the state's plea offer and provide full testimony. Mr. Pearson, the judge asked, do you understand that you're waiving your right to trial and agreeing to testify against your co-defendant? Stanley's voice was barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. I want to tell the truth about what happened. Joel watched Candy's expression as her lover publicly betrayed her. Shock, rage, desperation, and finally a kind of broken recognition that her carefully constructed world was disintegrating. Stanley's testimony was comprehensive and devastating. He admitted to the affair, described their plan to wait out Joel's deployment, and provided explicit details about Miranda's assault. Most damaging, He revealed that Candy had suggested staging the fall to avoid investigation. She said we needed to make it look like an accident, Stanley testified. Said her husband would never question a simple fall, especially if he was stuck underwater during the investigation. Candy's attorney objected repeatedly, claiming Stanley's testimony was unreliable and self-serving, but the evidence supported every detail. Financial records, phone logs, surveillance footage, and Miranda's own testimony created an unbreakable chain of proof. When Miranda took the stand, her testimony was calm, precise, and utterly damning. She described the scene she'd witnessed, Stanley's violent response, and her certainty that the fall had been staged while she was unconscious. I remember my mother checking my pulse before calling 911, Miranda said quietly. She waited to make sure I was still alive before reporting the accident. The gallery erupted in whispers. Even Candy's own family members, who'd attended to support her, looked shocked by the implications. Candy hadn't just covered up the assault. She'd calculated whether her daughter would survive before deciding how to proceed. Joel felt a cold satisfaction as the jury absorbed this revelation. Candy had revealed herself as a woman capable of prioritizing her own interests over her daughter's life. No amount of legal maneuvering could overcome that fundamental betrayal of maternal instinct. During recess, Joel intercepted Candy outside the women's restroom. They faced each other in the empty hallway, husband and wife, now irreconcilable enemies. "This isn't over," Candy said quietly. "You think you've won, but I still have options." "What options?" Joel's voice carried the same clinical detachment he used during combat briefings. "Your lover has confessed. Your daughter has testified against you. Your finances are frozen. Your career is destroyed, and your reputation is permanently ruined. I could claim you've been abusive. Say this whole thing is revenge for a marriage that was already failing." Joel's smile was genuinely amused. "Try it. I have 15 years of military service records, clean psychological evaluations, and testimony from dozens of fellow officers about my character. You have a history of infidelity, financial irresponsibility, and now attempted murder of your own daughter." Candy's composure finally cracked. Tears streamed down her face as she realized the full scope of her situation. "Please, we can work this out. I made mistakes, but I never meant for Miranda to get hurt. You chose Stanley over Miranda the moment you let him into our house. You chose him again when you staged your accident. You've been choosing him over our family for months." Joel's voice never rose above conversational level. Now you get to live with those choices. As the trial resumed, Joel felt the satisfaction of a submarine commander whose torpedoes had found their target. Both Stanley and Candy would face maximum sentences, but more importantly, they would face social destruction that would follow them for the rest of their lives. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Stanley received 12 years for assault, conspiracy, and false reporting. Candy received 15 years for the same charges, plus additional time for child endangerment and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. But Joel's real victory wasn't the prison sentences. It was the knowledge that when Stanley and Candy eventually returned to society, they would find a world where everyone knew exactly what they had done to Miranda Byers and her family. Justice, Joel reflected, wasn't just about punishment. It was about ensuring that betrayal carried permanent consequences. Chapter 8. Scorched Earth. 6 months after the trial, Joel stood in the empty shell of what had been Candy's real estate office, watching workers remove the last traces of her former life. The building's new tenant, a cybersecurity firm owned by one of Garrett's associates, was renovating the space completely. Miranda waited in the car outside, no longer requiring constant supervision, but still preferring to stay close to her father during these final cleanup operations. Her physical recovery had been remarkable, but the psychological healing would take longer. Trust, once shattered, was rebuilt slowly and selectively. Joel's phone buzzed with an update from Roberto Marks. Pearson's parole hearing denied. Earliest possibility, now 2035. Candy's appeal rejected by state Supreme Court. Both defendants officially exhausted all legal options. Joel saved the message and forwarded copies to his intelligence network. Stanley and Candy's legal fates were sealed, but Joel's campaign had always extended beyond the courtroom. Prison had broken Stanley completely. Garrett's contacts inside the correctional system reported that Stanley spent most of his time in protective custody, had attempted suicide twice, and showed signs of severe psychological deterioration. He would likely serve his full sentence in isolation, emerging as a broken man incapable of rebuilding any meaningful life. Candy had proven more resilient, maintaining her innocence and attempting to organize other inmates behind claims of prosecutorial misconduct. But her efforts were undermined by the simple fact that everyone, guards, inmates, and staff, knew exactly what she'd done to her own daughter. Maternal betrayal was universally despised, even in prison. More importantly, Joel's external campaign had ensured that both defendants faced permanent social exile. Their names appeared on dozens of websites dedicated to documenting crimes against children. Their photographs and conviction details were preserved in databases that would be discovered by any future employer, landlord, or potential partner. Joel had also quietly contacted Candy's extended family, parents, siblings, cousins, providing them with complete documentation of her crimes. The family had responded by formally disowning her, removing her from wills and trusts, and making it clear that she would receive no support upon release. Stanley's situation was even worse. His sister Bernice, whose recorded conversation had provided crucial evidence, had changed her name and moved across the country to escape association with his crimes. His few remaining friends had publicly denounced him after news coverage revealed his pattern of targeting military wives. "Daddy," Miranda's voice came through Joel's earpiece. "Are you finished in there?" "Almost done, sweetheart." Joel took a final photograph of the empty office, then joined his daughter in the car. "How are you feeling?" "Good. Ready to move forward." Miranda's voice carried a strength that made Joel proud. His daughter had endured betrayal and violence, but she'd emerged with her integrity intact and her loyalty uncompromised. They drove through Virginia Beach toward their new house, a fortress-like structure in a gated community where Joel could ensure his daughter's absolute security. The old house had been sold within days to another Navy family, its association with scandal apparently having minimal impact on market value. Joel's own life had stabilized into a new pattern. He'd accepted promotion to full commander and a position at the Pentagon, allowing him to remain close to Miranda while advancing his career. His military reputation had actually been enhanced by the scandal. Colleagues respected his methodical response to family crisis and his refusal to let personal betrayal compromise his professional duties. More importantly, Joel's network had expanded significantly during the operation against Candy and Stanley. Military officers, law enforcement contacts, private security specialists, and intelligence analysts had all contributed to the campaign. These relationships would prove valuable for future challenges, and everyone involved understood that Joel Byers was a man who protected his allies and destroyed his enemies with equal efficiency. "There's something I want to show you," Joel said as they approached their new neighborhood. He handed Miranda a manila folder containing photographs and documents. Miranda opened the folder and found herself looking at surveillance photos of Stanley in prison, hollow-eyed, skeletal, obviously broken by his incarceration. Additional photos showed Candy during her recent parole hearing, where she'd been denied early release despite claims of good behavior and rehabilitation. "I want you to understand," Joel said quietly, "that the people who hurt you will never recover from the consequences of their choices. They'll never again be in a position to harm anyone's family." Miranda studied the photographs with the analytical intelligence she'd inherited from her father. They looked destroyed, completely. Their lives, as they knew them, ended the day they decided to assault you. Everything since then has been just the slow realization of that fact. As they pulled into their new driveway, Miranda asked the question Joel had been expecting. "Do you think I'll ever be able to trust people again?" Joel considered his answer carefully. His daughter deserved honesty, not comforting platitudes. "You'll learn to trust selectively," he said finally. "You'll become very good at reading people's true character before allowing them close enough to hurt you." and you'll never again tolerate betrayal from anyone, no matter what relationship they claim with you. Like you. Exactly like me. Joel's smile carried genuine warmth for the first time in months. Some people call it being ruthless. I call it being realistic about human nature. They entered their new home together, father and daughter, survivors of a war that had taught them both the value of absolute loyalty and the cost of misplaced trust. Outside, Garrett's security team maintained discreet surveillance, ensuring that Joel's family would never again be vulnerable to attack from those they should have been able to trust. The submarine had finally found safe harbor, but its weapons remained armed and ready for anyone foolish enough to threaten what Joel Byers protected. Chapter 9. Surface Victory. 2 years later, Joel stood on the deck of the USS Normandy, his new command vessel, watching the sun set over the Pacific. His promotion to captain had come with assignment to one of the Navy's most advanced destroyers, recognition of his tactical brilliance and uncompromising leadership style. More importantly, it came with the knowledge that his reputation had been forged not just through military excellence, but through his methodical destruction of anyone who threatened his family. Miranda, now 18 and preparing for the Naval Academy, had grown into a formidable young woman who combined her father's analytical mind with a steely determination born from surviving betrayal. She'd chosen to follow Joel's path into military service, understanding that strength was the only reliable protection against a world filled with people willing to exploit trust for personal gain. Joel's secure phone buzzed with a message from Garrett. Final report enclosed. Both subjects confirmed neutralized permanently. The attached file contained updates Joel had been expecting. Stanley Pearson had died in prison 6 months ago, officially from complications related to chronic malnutrition and self-inflicted injuries, but more accurately from the psychological destruction Joel had orchestrated. Stanley had simply lost the will to continue existing. Candy's fate had been different, but equally final. Released after serving minimum sentence for good behavior, she discovered that Joel's social campaign had been even more effective than anticipated. Unable to find employment, housing, or social acceptance anywhere in the United States, she'd attempted to rebuild her life in Mexico. The attempt had failed catastrophically. Joel's international contacts, developed through years of military deployment, had ensured that Candy's criminal record and the details of her crimes followed her across borders. She died in a car accident outside Tijuana, driving drunk after losing her final appeal for asylum and protection. Joel felt no satisfaction from their deaths, only the cold completion of a tactical mission. Stanley and Candy had threatened his daughter, betrayed his trust, and demonstrated their willingness to prioritize their own desires over an innocent child's welfare. Their destruction had been inevitable from the moment they'd made those choices. Preston Nolan, now Joel's executive officer, approached with evening reports. Captain, all departments secured for the night. Any special orders? Maintain standard watch rotation. I'll be in my quarters reviewing tomorrow's training exercises. Joel's quarters aboard the Normandy were even more Spartan than his submarine cabin had been. A narrow bunk, a desk for charts and communications, and a single photograph. Miranda, in her academy uniform, smiling with the confident pride of someone who understood her own strength. Joel opened his laptop and reviewed intelligence reports from his growing network of contacts. Military officers whose wives had been targeted by predators like Stanley. Law enforcement officials who understood the importance of protecting military families. Private security specialists who shared Joel's philosophy about permanent solutions to recurring problems. Over the past 2 years, Joel had quietly assisted in 17 similar situations. Unfaithful spouses who'd endangered their children. Civilian criminals who'd targeted military families during deployments. Financial predators who'd exploited military wives' loneliness and isolation. In each case, Joel had provided tactical advice, resource connections, and strategic planning to ensure that threats were neutralized completely and permanently. His network had grown into an informal but highly effective organization dedicated to protecting military families from those who would exploit their service and sacrifice. None of these operations had required violence. Joel's reputation was now sufficient that most threats retreated when they learned of his involvement. Word had spread through military communities that Captain Joel Byers was a man who protected his allies with the same methodical precision he used to destroy his enemies. Joel's phone rang with a call from Miranda, now in her second year at Annapolis. "Hi, Dad. How's the Pacific treating you?" "Same as always. Vast, unpredictable, and full of hidden threats." "How are your studies?" "Challenging, but manageable. I'm particularly enjoying the tactical courses. Professor says I have an instinct for strategic thinking." Joel smiled at the pride in his daughter's voice. "That's genetic. Your grandfather was the same way during his Army service." "Dad, there's something I wanted to ask you." Miranda's tone became more serious. "Some of my classmates have been asking about what happened to Mom and Stanley. There are still news articles online, and people are curious. What do you tell them?" "The truth. That they chose to betray our family and assault me, and that they face the appropriate consequences for those choices." "How do people respond?" "Most are supportive. Military families understand that loyalty isn't negotiable. But a few seem to think you went too far, that everyone deserves second chances and forgiveness." Joel considered his response carefully. His daughter was old enough to understand the philosophical implications of his choices, mature enough to make her own decisions about mercy and justice. "Miranda, what do you think about second chances?" "I think second chances are earned through genuine repentance and changed behavior. I think some actions, like assaulting your lover's daughter to cover up adultery, demonstrate character flaws that can't be reformed." Miranda's voice carried the same clinical detachment Joel used during tactical assessments. "I think Mom and Stanley got exactly what they deserved. And the people who criticize that position, they've never been betrayed by someone they trusted completely. They don't understand that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt." Joel felt a deep satisfaction listening to his daughter's analysis. Miranda had inherited his strategic mind, but more importantly, she learned the crucial lesson that survival required the ability to identify and eliminate threats without sentiment or hesitation. "I'm proud of you," Joel said simply. "I learned from the best." After the call ended, Joel returned to his evening reports, but his mind remained focused on the larger picture. Miranda would graduate from the academy in 2 years, begin her own military career, and eventually face her own challenges with loyalty and betrayal. When that time came, she would be prepared. She would understand that mercy was a luxury reserved for those who had earned it, that trust was granted selectively and withdrawn permanently when abused, and that the only reliable protection against betrayal was the demonstrated capacity for overwhelming retaliation. Joel had spent 4 years transforming his personal tragedy into a comprehensive victory. Stanley and Candy were dead. Miranda was thriving. His own career had advanced beyond his highest expectations, and his network of allies had grown into a force capable of protecting military families throughout the Navy. Standing on the deck of his destroyer, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky, Captain Joel Byers understood that he had achieved something few men ever managed: absolute victory over those who had dared to threaten what he protected. The submarine had not only surfaced, but had become the flagship of a fleet dedicated to ensuring that betrayal carried swift, merciless, and permanent consequences. In the depths of the Pacific, Joel Byers had found his peace, not through forgiveness or reconciliation, but through the complete annihilation of his enemies and the absolute security of those he loved. Some wars ended with treaties and compromise. Others ended with total victory and the permanent silence of one's foes. Joel had chosen wisely. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Calculated Risks. Vincent Keller stared at the quarterly earnings report on his desk. His security firm, Sentinel Shield, had just landed its biggest contract yet, providing comprehensive protection for Phoenix Tech's new quantum computing division. The contract represented everything Vincent had worked for since founding his company 7 years ago. A perfect blend of physical security systems and cutting-edge cybersecurity protocols that nobody else in the industry could match. His office phone buzzed. Mr. Keller, Principal Whitman from Brookfield Elementary, is online too. It's about Leo. Vincent sighed, glancing at the framed photo on his desk. Himself, his wife Audra, 10-year-old Nora, and 6-year-old Leo at Disneyland last summer. For smiling faces. The perfect family. Put her through, he said. After a brief conversation about Leo's incident at school, Vincent grabbed his keys. Another fight. The third this month. Something was wrong with his normally even-tempered son, and Vincent was determined to find out what. As he drove to the school, his mind drifted to Audra. They'd met 12 years ago when his security firm was contracted to revamp her father's jewelry business security. Richard Preston had been one of the most respected jewelers in Boston, and Audra had been groomed to take over the family business. Her keen eye for detail and love of precision had captivated Vincent immediately. She was his perfect match, intelligent, driven, and captivating. The school principal was waiting with Leo in her office. The boy's eyes were red, his small fists clenched in his lap. Leo got into an altercation with another student today, Principal Whitman explained. He refuses to tell us why. Vincent knelt before his son. What happened, buddy? Leo's eyes welled with tears. Tommy said Mom has a boyfriend. He said his mom saw them at the HarborView Hotel. Vincent felt his blood run cold, but his face remained impassive. Years of military training and security work had taught him to control his reactions. We'll talk about this at home, he said calmly, taking Leo's hand. During the drive home, Vincent's mind raced through the past few months. Audra's late nights at the jewelry store, her increased business trips, the password-protected second phone he'd glimpsed in her purse, the sudden disinterest in their intimacy. At home, Vincent sat with Leo in the backyard treehouse, their special place for father-son talks. Tommy's just making up stories, Vincent assured him. Sometimes people say mean things that aren't true. But later that night, after the children were in bed, Vincent accessed his home security system. He'd installed it himself, state-of-the-art cameras, motion sensors, and data logging that track comings and goings. He pulled up the logs from the past 3 months. The pattern was unmistakable. Audra's late nights at the store aligned perfectly with the jewelry shop's closing time. She left the store, but didn't come home for hours afterward. Vincent felt his chest tighten as he cross-referenced the dates with her location data from their family phone plan. The HarborView Hotel appeared multiple times. Vincent closed his laptop, his face expressionless. He wouldn't confront her yet. First, he needed to know everything: who, what, when, and why. He needed to understand the full scope of the betrayal before deciding his next move. Because Vincent Keller never made a move without calculating all the risks. Chapter 2. The Gathering Storm. Vincent maintained his routine over the next 2 weeks, giving no indication that anything was amiss. He kissed Audra goodbye each morning, attended Nora's soccer games, helped Leo with his math homework, and continued growing his security empire. Behind this facade of normalcy, Vincent methodically gathered evidence. He installed a custom tracking app on Audra's primary phone, deployed specialized software to recover deleted texts, and set up discreet surveillance. The man in question was Brennan Walsh, a high-end real estate developer who specialized in luxury properties. He had met Audra 6 months ago when he commissioned a custom line of jewelry for his most exclusive clients. Tall, polished, with an easy charm that opened doors throughout Boston's elite circles, Brennan represented old money and the social connections Audra had always coveted. Through carefully placed cameras, Vincent captured footage of Audra and Brennan together. Their rendezvous had evolved into a regular Thursday pattern at the HarborView, followed by Sunday afternoon meetings at Brennan's waterfront penthouse. Vincent also discovered that Brennan had a history of affairs with married women. 3 previous relationships followed the same pattern, intense affairs lasting about a year, ending when the women divorced their husbands. None of those women ended up with Brennan long-term. One evening, Audra announced she had an emergency at the jewelry store. A special client needed an appraisal that couldn't wait until morning. "Don't wait up," she said, kissing Vincent's cheek. "I might be very late." Vincent nodded, his face betraying nothing. "No problem. I need to finalize the Phoenix Tech protocols anyway." As soon as her car disappeared down the driveway, Vincent opened his laptop and activated the GPS tracker. He watched the blinking dot of Audra's phone as it traveled not to the jewelry store downtown, but toward the harbor. The dot stopped at Brennan's luxury condominium building. Vincent took a deep breath, closed the laptop, and walked upstairs to check on the children. Nora was reading in bed, her blonde hair, so like her mother's, spread across her pillow. "Daddy," she said, looking up from her book, "when is Mom coming home?" "Late tonight, sweetheart. She has to help a special customer." Nora frowned. "She's always helping special customers now." Vincent felt a stab of anger, but kept his voice gentle. "That's part of running a successful business. Just like I sometimes have to work late, too." Next, he checked on Leo, who was already asleep, clutching his favorite dinosaur toy. Vincent stood in the doorway, watching his son's peaceful breathing, and made a silent vow. Whatever happened next, he would protect his children from the fallout. The next day, Vincent contracted a private investigator to dig deeper into Brennan Walsh's background. The PI discovered that beneath Brennan's polished exterior lurked a web of questionable business practices. His real estate developments were funded by a maze of shell companies, and several of his projects had faced lawsuits over safety violations and permit irregularities. More interestingly, Brennan had recently begun pressuring Audra to incorporate her family's jewelry business into his portfolio of luxury brands. He'd introduced her to wealthy investors who could help expand Preston Jewelers beyond its current scale. Vincent understood now. This wasn't just about a physical affair. Brennan was systematically working to pull Audra away from her old life, including her husband and family. The affair was just one part of a larger strategy to acquire both Audra and her family's prestigious jewelry business. That night, Vincent lay awake beside his sleeping wife, studying her face in the dim light filtering through the curtains. 10 years of marriage, 2 children, countless shared dreams, all of it built on what he had believed was an unbreakable foundation of trust and loyalty. His military training had taught him that the most dangerous enemies were those who appeared as allies. Audra had become the enemy within his own home, and Brennan Walsh was the external threat. Both needed to be neutralized, but Vincent wouldn't rush. The perfect operation required patience, precision, and proper intelligence. He would wait, watch, and prepare. The storm was gathering, but only Vincent knew when and where it would break. Chapter 3: Shattered Glass. 3 months of surveillance had provided Vincent with everything he needed. He had compiled a comprehensive file on the affair: dates, times, locations, photographs, and recordings. He also had detailed information on Brennan Walsh's business dealings, including evidence of permit bribery and tax evasion that could be devastating if revealed to the right authorities. It was time for the confrontation. Vincent chose a Sunday evening after the children had gone to bed. Audra was in their home office, working on the jewelry store's quarterly reports, or so she claimed. Vincent knew she was actually messaging Brennan about their planned getaway the following weekend. He entered the office silently, placed a thick folder on the desk in front of her, and sat down in the adjacent chair. "What's this?" Audra asked, glancing up from her laptop. "Evidence," Vincent replied calmly, "of your affair with Brennan Walsh." The color drained from Audra's face. She opened the folder with trembling fingers, then quickly closed it after seeing the first photograph, she and Brennan embracing in the elevator of his condominium. "How long have you known?" she whispered. "Long enough. The real question is how long you thought you could keep it hidden." Audra's initial shock quickly transformed into defensive anger. "You were never really present, Vincent. Always working, always obsessed with your security systems and corporate clients. Brennan makes me feel alive, appreciated." Vincent's expression remained neutral. "And I'm sure he appreciates your family's jewelry business connections as much as he appreciates you." "That's not fair," Audra snapped. Brennan sees potential in me that you never did. He wants to help me expand the business globally. After he helps you destroy our family?" Vincent's voice remained eerily calm. "Did you plan to take the children when you left?" Tears welled in Audra's eyes. "I never wanted to hurt the children, but you were willing to hurt me. You don't need me, Vincent. You never have. Your work, your systems, your controlled, calculated life, that's your real passion." Vincent leaned forward. "You're right about one thing. I am calculating, and I've calculated exactly what this divorce will cost you." He pulled out another document, a prenuptial agreement they had signed before their marriage. Vincent had insisted on it to protect his fledgling security business, but it worked both ways. It clearly stated that infidelity would result in the unfaithful party forfeiting any claim to the other's business assets. "You'll get nothing from Sentinel Shield," Vincent stated flatly, "and I'll fight for full custody of the children." Audra's tears flowed freely now. "You wouldn't separate me from Nora and Leo. They need their mother." "Do they need a mother who lies? Who sneaks around with another man while their father works to provide for the family?" Vincent's control slipped for just a moment, revealing the rage beneath. "You made your choice, Audra. Now you'll live with the consequences." The divorce proceedings were swift but brutal. Audra fought for joint custody, which Vincent ultimately agreed to, not out of mercy, but strategy. The children would spend weekdays with him and weekends with Audra. This arrangement gave Vincent the time he needed to implement the next phase of his plan while maintaining a relationship with his children. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, Audra moved in with Brennan Walsh. She sold her share of the family jewelry business to her younger brother, using the money to invest in Brennan's latest development project, a luxury residence called the Lighthouse. Vincent focused on his children and his business. He expanded Sentinel Shield's operations, securing government contracts that doubled the company's value. To the outside world, he appeared to be thriving despite the divorce. Nora struggled with the new family arrangement, becoming withdrawn and resentful toward her mother. Leo, however, adapted more easily, though he still didn't fully understand why his parents couldn't live together anymore. 6 months after the divorce, Vincent received a gilt-edged envelope in the mail. Inside was an invitation to Audra and Brennan's wedding, scheduled for the following month at the Lighthouse, Brennan's crowning achievement and a symbol of their new life together. Vincent slipped the invitation into his desk drawer, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The invitation wasn't a peace offering. It was Audra and Brennan's way of showing that they had won, that they had moved on to bigger and better things. But Vincent knew something they didn't. The game had only just begun. Chapter 4: Foundation of Lies. The sprawling ballroom of the Lighthouse glittered with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. 200 guests in formal attire mingled, celebrating the union of Brennan Walsh and Audra Preston. At the entrance, a magnificent ice sculpture depicted 2 intertwined swans, a symbol of eternal love that would melt away before morning. Vincent stood near the bar, nursing a whiskey. He had come alone, dressed in an impeccable charcoal suit that highlighted his athletic build. Several women had already approached him, intrigued by the handsome, stoic man with penetrating eyes. "I'm surprised you came," said a voice beside him. It was Philip Preston, Audra's brother and the new owner of Preston Jewelers. "For the children's sake," Vincent replied. "They're part of this celebration, too." Philip nodded toward the dance floor, where 10-year-old Nora twirled in a lavender dress, while 6-year-old Leo fidgeted uncomfortably in his suit nearby. "They seem to be handling it well." Vincent merely nodded, his eyes tracking Brennan Walsh as he worked the room, shaking hands and accepting congratulations. The real estate developer had spared no expense for this wedding, transforming the top floor of the Lighthouse into a showcase of wealth and influence. "Mr. Keller." A server approached with a tray of champagne. "The bride requests your presence for the family photos." Vincent followed the server to a secluded terrace where Audra waited in her designer wedding gown. The ocean breeze gently lifted her veil as she turned to face him. "Thank you for coming," she said, "and for bringing the children. It means a lot to me. As I said in my RSVP, I'm here to support Nora and Leo during this transition." Vincent's tone was professional, as if addressing a client rather than his ex-wife. Audra studied his face, searching for any hint of bitterness or anger, but Vincent's expression revealed nothing. "You look well, Vincent. Success is the best revenge. Isn't that what they say?" Before Audra could respond, the photographer called them over for the family portraits. Vincent stood beside his children, smiling appropriately for the camera while maintaining a calculated distance from Audra and Brennan. After the photos, Vincent rejoined the reception. He made small talk with guests, many of whom were prominent figures in Boston's business community. To everyone who asked, he expressed nothing but well wishes for the newlyweds. Meanwhile, Leo had grown increasingly restless. Vincent watched as his son wandered between tables, eventually slipping away from the reception area toward the service corridors. Concerned, Vincent followed. He found Leo in an empty hallway, staring intently at something on a sleek smartphone, a device Vincent didn't recognize. "Leo, what are you doing back here? And whose phone is that?" Leo jumped, startled by his father's voice. "Dad, we need to leave. Now." The urgency in his son's voice was unmistakable. Vincent knelt beside him, smiling gently. "What?" Leo glanced nervously over his shoulder before holding out the phone. "Look at this." The screen showed a video of Brennan Walsh in what appeared to be his office at the lighthouse. He was arguing heatedly with a man Vincent recognized as Oscar Delgado, a city building inspector. Money changed hands, followed by building permits being signed. Vincent froze, his mind racing. This was blatant bribery, recorded in high definition. And somehow, impossibly, his 6-year-old son had this evidence in his hands. "Leo, where did you get this phone?" "It was under the chair in Mr. Walsh's dressing room. I was playing hide-and-seek with cousin Timmy and found it." Leo's eyes were wide. "Dad, is Mr. Walsh a bad guy?" Vincent carefully took the phone, noting that it was an encrypted model, the kind used by those who valued privacy above all else. "Why do you think we need to leave?" "Because that man in the video was here earlier. He saw me coming out of the dressing room and asked if I'd been inside. He looked really mad." Vincent's protective instincts flared. If Delgado suspected Leo had found the phone and seen its contents, the boy could be in danger. "You did the right thing showing me this," Vincent said, pocketing the device. "Let's go find your sister. I think it's time we headed home." As they turned to leave, Vincent spotted a shadow moving at the end of the hallway. Someone had been listening. Vincent gathered both children, making a plausible excuse to Audra about Leo feeling unwell. As they left the lighthouse, he noticed a black SUV pulling away from the curb, following at a discreet distance. Back at his fortified home, Vincent examined the phone more thoroughly. Beyond the bribery video, he found evidence of Brennan's entire corrupt operation. Falsified structural reports, safety violations hidden from inspectors, and substandard materials used throughout the lighthouse's construction. The building where Audra now lived. The building where his children would spend their weekends. The building currently hosting hundreds of wedding guests. Vincent accessed a secure computer system and began downloading the phone's contents. This unexpected windfall of evidence would accelerate his plans significantly, but it also created a new problem. Leo was now potentially in danger. The sound of his security perimeter alarm interrupted his thoughts. The system showed a vehicle stopping outside his gate. Vincent switched to the external cameras and saw the same black SUV from earlier. 2 men approached the gate, but retreated when the automated security warning activated. Vincent made 2 calls that night. The first was to his most trusted employee, Barrett Reese, a former Delta Force operator who now served as Sentinel Shield's head of operations. "I need a security detail for my children, starting immediately," Vincent instructed. "And prepare the safe house in New Hampshire. We may need it." The second call was to a data security specialist who owed Vincent a favor. "I need a complete background sweep on Oscar Delgado, building inspector for the Boston metropolitan area. Everything, financial records, communications, associations. Priority status." As Vincent hung up, he gazed at the sleeping forms of his children. The stakes had just been raised significantly. What had begun as a personal vendetta against Audra and Brennan was now potentially life-threatening for his family. Vincent had planned to dismantle Brennan Walsh's life piece by piece over the course of months. Now, that timeline would need to be accelerated, because Vincent Keller protected what was his, and anyone who threatened his children would learn just how dangerous he could be. Chapter 5. Structural Weakness. The morning after the wedding, Vincent implemented enhanced security protocols for his family. Barrett Reese assigned 2 experienced operatives to guard the children at all times, former military personnel with specific training in child protection. Their presence was explained to Nora and Leo as special friends who would be helping the family for a while. Vincent also activated his network of informants within Boston's construction industry. Within hours, he had confirmation of what the phone evidence suggested. The lighthouse, Brennan Walsh's crowning achievement, was fundamentally unsound. Corners had been cut throughout the construction process. Load-bearing supports were inadequate. Electrical systems failed to meet code requirements. Fire suppression systems were substandard. Walsh had bribed multiple inspectors to overlook these deficiencies, all to save money and accelerate the project's completion. Worst of all, the building was already showing signs of structural stress. Hairline cracks had appeared in several support columns. The building wasn't in immediate danger of collapse, but it was far from the luxury haven its residents believed they'd purchased. Vincent faced a moral dilemma. Exposing these flaws would protect innocent residents, including his children during their weekend visits, but would delay his meticulously planned revenge. After careful consideration, he chose a third option: anonymous notification to state-level inspectors who couldn't be bought by Walsh, timed to coincide with the next phase of his plan. 3 days after the wedding, Vincent received a call from Audra. "Someone broke into our penthouse while we were on our honeymoon," she said, her voice tight with anxiety. "They didn't take anything, but they went through our files in Brennan's home office." "Have you filed a police report?" Vincent asked, his tone neutral despite knowing exactly who had orchestrated the break-in. "Brennan doesn't want the police involved. He says it might have been industrial espionage related to his next development project." Vincent paused deliberately. "If you're concerned about the children's safety during their visits, they can stay with me until this is resolved." "No," Audra replied quickly. "Brennan's hired additional security. The children will be safe here." After hanging up, Vincent contacted his operative inside the lighthouse's security team. "What's Walsh's status?" "Panicking," came the reply. "He can't find his private phone and suspects corporate sabotage. He's hired a digital forensics team to sweep for surveillance devices." "And Delgado?" "He's gone underground, cleaned out his bank accounts yesterday, and hasn't reported to work." Vincent nodded, though the operative couldn't see him. Oscar Delgado's sudden disappearance suggested the inspector feared exposure, exactly as planned. That evening, Vincent received a secure video call from his data specialist. "You need to see this," she said, transmitting encrypted files to Vincent's system. The information revealed that Brennan Walsh's financial empire was leveraged to the breaking point. The lighthouse had gone dramatically over budget due to rushed construction timelines. Walsh had taken enormous loans, using other properties as collateral. If the lighthouse failed, either commercially or structurally, his entire business would collapse. Even more damning, Vincent discovered that Audra had remortgaged her share of Preston Jewelers to invest in Walsh's venture. Her brother Philip knew nothing about this secondary loan against the family business. Vincent spent the night mapping out connections and vulnerabilities. By morning, he had identified the perfect structural weakness in Walsh's life, not in his buildings, but in his web of financial deceptions. The following day, Philip Preston received an anonymous email containing proof of Audra's unauthorized loan against the family business. Vincent watched from his car outside Preston Jewelers as Philip stormed out, visibly agitated, and drove directly to the lighthouse. Meanwhile, the state building inspector's office received an anonymous package containing select evidence from the encrypted phone, specifically focused on safety violations that endanger residents. The documentation was carefully curated to trigger an immediate inspection without revealing the full extent of Walsh's corruption. Phase 1 was complete. The foundations of Brennan Walsh's life were beginning to crack. That weekend, When the children returned from their first official visit to their mother's new home, Leo seemed withdrawn. Vincent found him sitting alone in the backyard treehouse. "Everything okay, buddy?" Vincent asked, climbing up to join his son. Leo shrugged. Mom and Mr. Walsh were fighting a lot. About money and some people called investors. Vincent kept his expression neutral. "Sometimes grown-ups worry about work problems. Mr. Walsh said some bad words about you," Leo continued. "When they didn't know I was listening. He said you were trying to ruin them." Vincent placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "What do you think about that?" Leo looked up, his young face serious. "I think Mr. Walsh is afraid of you. And I think—" He hesitated. "I think he has more bad videos on another phone. I saw him watching one and hiding it when Mom came in." Vincent's interest sharpened. "Did you see what was on it?" "Just a little bit. It looked like the same office, but different people." Leo's eyes widened suddenly. "Dad, one of Mr. Walsh's friends kept looking at me weird all weekend. Like he was mad at me. Is it because of that phone I found at the wedding?" Vincent felt a cold fury build inside him. "Possibly. But don't worry. No one's going to hurt you. Promise?" "I promise." Vincent's voice was steel. "And I always keep my promises." That night, after the children were asleep, Vincent made another call to Barrett Reese. "Change of plans," he said. "We're accelerating the timeline. I want everything in place within 48 hours. "That's aggressive," Barrett replied. "What's changed?" "They've threatened my son." Indirectly, but unmistakably. Vincent's voice was cold and precise. "I won't wait for them to become more direct." After ending the call, Vincent went to his secure room in the basement, a space built to military specifications, with soundproofed walls and equipment that would be at home in a high-level intelligence agency. He opened a hidden safe and removed a small case containing specialized equipment. For the past year, even before discovering Audra's affair, Vincent had been developing an advanced security system for high-value clients, a system that could bypass conventional protections undetected. The prototype was complete but untested in the field. Until now, Vincent had planned to dismantle Brennan Walsh's life systematically over months. But threats against his child had changed the equation. Now, Walsh would experience the full force of Vincent Keller's vengeance in one devastating assault. Because Vincent had long lived by a simple code: betray him, and he might consider mercy. Threaten his children, and there would be none. Chapter 6. Pressure Points. A week later, Brennan Walsh stood in his penthouse office at the lighthouse, staring at the Boston skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The view had once represented his triumph, the culmination of years building his real estate empire. Now it was beginning to feel like a cage. State building inspectors had arrived unexpectedly 2 days earlier, conducting thorough examinations of structural elements, electrical systems, and fire safety protocols. They had been coldly professional, immune to Walsh's usual charm and deflection tactics. "They've issued preliminary findings," said Audra, entering the office with a thick envelope. Her face was pale, her usual confidence visibly shaken. "It's not good, Brennan." The report detailed multiple code violations, not enough to condemn the building outright, but sufficient to require expensive remediation and potentially trigger resident lawsuits. Additionally, the inspectors had referred certain findings to the district attorney's office for further investigation. "This is a minor setback," Walsh insisted, though sweat beaded on his forehead. "I've handled government busybodies before." "Not like this," Audra countered. "These aren't local inspectors. They're from a state oversight board, beyond your network of influence." Walsh slammed his fist on the desk. "Someone's targeting me. First my private phone disappears, then Philip confronts you about the business loan. Now, these inspectors. This isn't coincidence." Audra wrapped her arms around herself. "You think it's Vincent? Who else would benefit from destroying us? Who else has the resources and motivation?" "Vincent isn't vindictive," Audra argued, though uncertainty tinged her voice. "He's calculating, yes, but he wouldn't. He's a security expert with military training and government connections." Walsh interrupted. "He's exactly the type who could orchestrate something like this." Their conversation was interrupted by Walsh's assistant announcing the arrival of his investors. three men representing the consortium that had funded the lighthouse's completion. "We need to project absolute confidence," Walsh whispered urgently to Audra. "Our entire future depends on keeping their trust." The meeting began cordially, but quickly descended into thinly veiled threats. The investors had received anonymous information about structural deficiencies and potential legal liabilities. They demanded immediate action to protect their investment. "Perhaps we should consider bringing in an independent contractor to verify these findings," suggested the lead investor, Westmore. "Someone with impeccable credentials in building security and systems integrity." "I can handle this internally," Walsh insisted. Westmore's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Actually, we've already identified the perfect candidate. Sentinel Shield has an outstanding reputation for thoroughness and discretion." Walsh paled visibly. "That's Vincent Keller's company." "Indeed," Westmore replied. "Is there some reason you object to working with the industry leader?" Before Walsh could respond, his personal phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. When he answered, the blood drained from his face. "Mr. Walsh," said a clinical voice on the speaker, "this is Dr. Landon from Boston Memorial. There's been an incident involving Oscar Delgado. Before losing consciousness, he specifically requested we contact you." After ending the call, Walsh turned to find the investors watching him with newfound suspicion. "A former associate," he explained weakly. "Nothing related to this project, but the damage was done." The meeting ended with the investors imposing strict conditions. Either Walsh cooperate fully with the coming investigation, including the involvement of Sentinel Shield, or they would withdraw their financial support and pursue legal remedies. After they departed, Walsh collapsed into his chair. "This is a coordinated attack. Keller is systematically destroying everything we've built." Audra stared out at the darkening sky. "I need to protect my children. If what you're saying is true, if Vincent is behind this, then escalating the situation will only make things worse." "It's too late for that," Walsh snapped. "Don't you see? He won't stop until he's taken everything from us." "I should speak with him," Audra suggested. "For the children's sake, he might." "No," Walsh interrupted. "I have my own contingency plans. People who can handle Keller permanently." Audra recoiled. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I won't be ruined by your ex-husband's vendetta. There are people who owe me favors, people who can make problems disappear. You can't be serious. He's the father of my children." Walsh's expression hardened. "You chose me, Audra. You chose this life. Now you need to decide where your loyalty truly lies." Across the city, in his secure control room, Vincent watched the entire exchange through the surveillance system he'd covertly installed in Walsh's office during the break-in. Audra's shocked expression at Walsh's implied threat confirmed what Vincent had suspected. She had never fully understood the man she'd married. Vincent turned to Barrett Reese, who stood silently beside him. "Walsh just threatened my life." Barrett nodded grimly. "That changes the rules of engagement. Implementation of Phase 2 begins tonight," Vincent instructed. "And alert the protective detail for the children. Double coverage, emergency protocols in effect." Barrett hesitated. "Sir, if Walsh is contacting the kind of people who make problems disappear, we should consider extracting you to a secure location as well." Vincent's smile was cold. "That won't be necessary. Let him send his people. They'll find I'm not as easily eliminated as he hopes." Later that evening, Vincent received a text from Audra. "We need to talk about the children." Privately, Vincent recognized the attempt at manipulation. Walsh was using Audra to lure him into a vulnerable position. The fact that she was complicit confirmed the final dissolution of any lingering respect he might have felt for her. He replied simply, "All communication regarding the children should go through our lawyers." Then he activated the final sequence of his plan, a series of precisely timed information releases that would completely dismantle Brennan Walsh's life over the next 72 hours. First, the complete building inspection records would be anonymously delivered to every resident of a lighthouse, along with a detailed analysis of how these deficiencies endangered their safety. Second, Walsh's investors would receive comprehensive documentation of his financial deceptions, including evidence that he had been simultaneously pledging the same assets as collateral for multiple loans. Third, select journalists would receive evidence of Walsh's history of bribing officials, complete with banking records showing payments. And finally, a specialized data package would be sent to federal prosecutors, containing evidence sufficient to justify a full investigation into Walsh's business practices across multiple states. Vincent had originally planned to release this information gradually over months, allowing Walsh to suffer the slow destruction of everything he valued. But Walsh's threat had changed the calculus. Now, destruction would come all at once, overwhelming and inescapable. As Vincent finalized the automated release sequence, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message contained only coordinates and a time, a remote location, midnight. Barrett, looking over Vincent's shoulder, frowned. It's obviously a trap. Obviously, Vincent agreed, which makes it the perfect opportunity to end this conclusively. Barrett's expression showed concern. Sir, with respect, engaging directly violates every security protocol. We can accomplish our objectives without placing you at risk. Vincent's eyes were cold. This isn't just about objectives anymore. Walsh threatened my children. That demands a personal response. As he began preparing for the midnight meeting, Vincent received an unexpected call from Philip Preston, Audra's brother. I need to see you immediately, Philip said, his voice strained. It's about Audra and the children. Something's wrong. Vincent hesitated only briefly. Meet me at Sentinel headquarters in 30 minutes. Come alone. The pieces were moving faster now, configurations shifting unpredictably. But Vincent had trained his entire life for exactly this kind of strategic chaos. Because in the end, his opponents were playing a game they barely understood, while Vincent had written the rules. Chapter 7. Collapse. Vincent arrived early at the abandoned shipyard, positioning himself with clear sight lines of the surrounding area. The midnight meeting was indeed a trap, just as he had expected, but not the crude ambush Walsh had planned. Through thermal imaging equipment, Vincent detected 5 armed men concealed among the shipping containers. Their positions formed a classic kill box, a tactical arrangement designed to eliminate a target with overlapping fields of fire. Amateur work. Predictable. Vincent activated his phone and accessed a secure application. On the screen, a 3D rendering of the lighthouse appeared, with critical stress points highlighted in red. With a single command, he could trigger the release of all the accumulated evidence against Walsh. With another, he could activate the specialized equipment he had planted throughout the lighthouse during the security inspection conducted by Sentinel Shield operatives. But Vincent waited. Timing was everything. His earpiece crackled. Sir, we have movement at the south entrance. 2 vehicles approaching. The first car parked at a distance. Brennan Walsh emerged, scanning the surroundings nervously. The second vehicle, an unmarked van, positioned itself closer to the hidden gunman. Vincent smiled coldly. Exactly as anticipated. He pressed a button on his phone, sending a pre-recorded message to Walsh's phone. Look up. As Walsh frantically searched the darkness above him, powerful spotlights suddenly illuminated the entire area. Simultaneously, the sound of multiple police sirens filled the air. The hidden gunmen broke cover, running for their vehicles. Walsh stood frozen in the harsh light, suddenly exposed and vulnerable. Vincent spoke into his communication device. Execute. The unmarked van's side doors slid open, revealing not hired killers but Barrett Reese and a team of former military operatives wearing body cameras. They quickly apprehended the fleeing gunmen while documenting everything. Walsh finally spotted Vincent walking calmly toward him, silhouetted against the lights. What is this? Walsh demanded, his voice cracking. Where are the police? There are no police, Vincent replied evenly. Just as there are no real gunmen targeting me. Your associates were intercepted and replaced hours ago. Walsh's face contorted with rage and fear. What do you want from me? I want you to understand something, Vincent said, his voice deadly quiet. You threatened my children. That was your final mistake. I never threatened your children. Walsh protested. This is insanity. Vincent held up his phone, playing the recorded conversation from Walsh's office. I have my own contingency plans. People who can handle Keller permanently. You were recording me? In my own home. Walsh's shock was genuine. The same way you recorded your bribery meetings with inspectors, Vincent countered. The phone Leo found at your wedding? It contained quite the collection of videos. Walsh paled. The boy. He's been your spy all along. Vincent's expression hardened. My son found your phone by accident. But you and your associates made him a target. Another critical error. He showed Walsh the screen of his phone, where the 3D model of the lighthouse still glowed. In approximately 10 minutes, every resident of your building will receive detailed information about its structural deficiencies. Your investors will learn about your financial deceptions. Prosecutors will receive evidence of your criminal activities. And Audra will discover exactly what kind of man she married. Walsh lunged forward desperately, but Vincent sidestepped easily, using Walsh's momentum to send him sprawling to the ground. You're finished, Walsh. Your reputation, your business, your freedom, all gone. Vincent's voice remained unervingly calm. Not because you took my wife, she made her choice, but because you threatened my family. As Walsh struggled to his feet, Vincent delivered his final blow. Oh, and Philip knows everything now. About Audra remortgaging Preston Jewelers, about your plan to absorb the business after bankrupting it. He's already filed for an emergency injunction to protect the family assets. Walsh's face crumpled as he realized the full extent of his defeat. You can't do this. Those building modifications can be explained. The financial arrangements were complex but legal. I have lawyers. What you have, Vincent interrupted, is approximately 9 minutes to decide how you want this to end. You can run, though I wouldn't recommend it. You can face the consequences of your actions. Or you can try to mitigate the damage by cooperating fully with authorities. Walsh's phone began ringing incessantly. Investors, business partners, lawyers, all simultaneously discovering his betrayals. Why? Walsh whispered, suddenly looking older and smaller. Why not just expose me? Why this elaborate game? Vincent studied him dispassionately. Because I wanted you to experience exactly what you inflicted on others. The slow realization that everything you built was founded on lies. The helplessness of watching it all collapse around you. The knowledge that you brought this on yourself. As Walsh sank to his knees, Vincent turned and walked away, leaving him surrounded by the ruins of his life. Back in his vehicle, Vincent confirmed the automated release of all evidence packages. Then he made one final call. It's done, he told Barrett. Proceed with Phase 3. Because while Walsh's destruction was nearly complete, Audra's reckoning had only just begun. Chapter 8. Fault Lines. The Preston family estate stood on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic, a Victorian mansion that had witnessed 5 generations of family history. Tonight, it would witness the final unraveling of Audra Preston's carefully constructed facade. Philip Preston had arranged an emergency family meeting under the pretense of discussing the jewelry business's future. The actual agenda was far more consequential. Vincent arrived precisely on time, noting the security personnel discreetly positioned around the property, his own people, integrated with the Preston family's regular security detail. Nothing would happen tonight that he hadn't anticipated. Inside, the family had gathered in the wood-paneled library. Audra sat rigidly beside her mother, Eleanor Preston, the family matriarch. Philip stood by the fireplace, his expression grim. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins filled the remaining seats, all sensing the unusual tension in the room. Notably absent was Brennan Walsh, who was currently being interviewed by federal agents regarding construction fraud and bribery allegations that had mysteriously surfaced hours earlier. When Vincent entered, Audra's eyes widened in shock. What is he doing here? This is a family meeting. Vincent is here at my invitation, Philip stated firmly. What we're discussing tonight affects him and his children directly. Eleanor Preston straightened in her chair. At 72, she remained the family's moral authority and keeper of its legacy. What exactly are we discussing, Philip? Your message suggested some urgent threat to the business. Philip nodded solemnly. Not just to the business, Mother, to our entire family legacy. He removed a folder from his desk and distributed documents to everyone present. These papers show that Audra secretly took out a second mortgage on her share of Preston Jewelers, without board approval or family knowledge. Gasps and murmurs filled the room as family members examined the evidence. Further, Philip continued. She invested that money in her husband's real estate development, the Lighthouse, a project now under criminal investigation for safety violations, permit fraud, and financial irregularities. All eyes turned to Audra, whose face had drained of color. "Is this true?" Eleanor demanded. Audra's composure cracked. It was a temporary measure. Brennan needed additional capital to complete the project. Once it was successful, I would have restored everything, without telling any of us. Philip interrupted. Without considering the risk to a business that supported this family for generations? I made a business decision, Audra insisted, her voice rising. The potential returns justified the risk. Eleanor's expression hardened. We don't gamble with the family legacy, Audra. That has always been our principle. This isn't about business principles, Audra snapped. This is about Vincent poisoning all of you against me. Vincent, who had remained silent until now, spoke quietly. I provided Philip with information he had a right to know. Nothing more. Liar. Audra stood, trembling with rage. You've orchestrated this entire situation. The building inspections, the investor panic, the criminal investigation. It's all your revenge for my leaving you. Philip shook his head. Audra, Vincent didn't create false building violations or invent financial irregularities. Those existed because of choices you and Brennan made. You don't understand, Audra insisted. Brennan had a vision, a development that would revolutionize luxury living in Boston. Yes, there were shortcuts, but every major project has them. Eleanor's voice cut through the room like ice. Shortcuts. Is that what we're calling fraud now? She turned to Philip. What's the extent of our exposure? If the Lighthouse fails, which seems increasingly likely, we stand to lose not just Audra's investment, but potentially the entire business due to the terms of her secret loan. Vincent observed the family's reactions, shock transforming into anger, directed primarily at Audra. This was the reckoning he had planned from the beginning. Not just Walsh's destruction, but Audra's complete loss of her family's respect and trust. There is another matter we need to discuss, Vincent said, addressing the entire family. The safety of my children during their custody visits with Audra. Audra's head snapped up. You will not use this situation to take my children from me. I'm not trying to take them from you, Vincent replied calmly. I'm ensuring their safety given that Brennan Walsh is now under criminal investigation and has demonstrated a willingness to employ dangerous individuals. He explained Walsh's implied threat against him and the planned ambush at the shipyard, carefully omitting his own role in setting up the trap. Eleanor turned to Audra, her expression a mixture of disappointment and disbelief. You married a man who would resort to violence? He was desperate. Audra cried. Vincent was systematically destroying everything we'd built. So you're not denying it, Philip said quietly. Audra faltered, suddenly realizing the corner she'd backed herself into. I didn't know the details of Brennan's plans, but Vincent has been targeting us from the beginning. And why would he do that? Eleanor asked. Because you betrayed your marriage vows? Or because you involve your children in a relationship with a man of questionable character and ethics? The meeting continued for another hour, with the family methodically dismantling Audra's defenses. Eventually, they reached several decisions. First, Audra would be removed from the Preston Jewelers board immediately, with her shares placed in a family trust. Second, she would agree to supervised visitation with the children until Brennan Walsh's legal situation was resolved. Third, she would cooperate fully with authorities investigating the Lighthouse's financial and safety issues to help mitigate damage to the family name. As the meeting concluded, family members filed out, few making eye contact with Audra. Only Eleanor remained, sitting regally in her chair as Audra stood desolate by the fireplace. Vincent prepared to leave, his objectives accomplished, but Eleanor's voice stopped him. Mr. Keller, a moment, please. Vincent approached the family matriarch respectfully. Despite everything, Eleanor Preston commanded deference. You orchestrated this entire scenario, didn't you? She asked, her voice pitched for his ears alone. Vincent met her gaze steadily. I merely ensured that the truth came to light. Eleanor studied him with shrewd eyes. The timing, the precise unveiling of evidence, the calculated destruction of both my daughter's marriage and her standing in this family. That goes beyond revealing truth. That required planning, patience, a willingness to be ruthless. Perhaps, Vincent acknowledged without elaboration. My daughter betrayed you, Eleanor continued. She broke vows and pursued self-interest at the expense of family. For that, she deserved consequences. The elderly woman's expression hardened. But remember this, Mr. Keller. Those children are still Preston's. They are part of this family's legacy. Whatever happens between you and my daughter, those children will always have a place here. Vincent inclined his head slightly. I would never separate them from their heritage. Mrs. Preston, see that you don't. Eleanor's tone made it clear the conversation was over. As Vincent left the estate, he found Audra waiting by his car, her eyes red from crying, but her posture defiant. Are you satisfied now? She demanded. You've taken everything from me. My husband, my family, my business, and now you're trying to take my children. You took those things from yourself, Audra, Vincent replied evenly. Every choice had consequences. You just refused to see them. I made one mistake, she whispered. Falling for Brennan's charm, believing in his vision. Does that justify destroying my entire life? Vincent regarded her dispassionately. The mistake wasn't falling for Walsh. It was betraying the people who trusted you, your family, your children, me. It was placing your desires above your responsibilities. And you've never made mistakes? Audra challenged. You were cold, distant, always working. You treated our marriage like another security system to be designed and maintained. Perhaps, Vincent acknowledged. But I never betrayed you. I never lied to you. I never placed you or our children in danger. Audra's shoulders slumped in defeat. What happens now? Brennan will likely face criminal charges. The lighthouse will be renovated to address safety concerns or possibly condemned. Your family will protect what remains of their business. Vincent's voice softened marginally. And our children will continue to need both their parents, though under different circumstances than before. You want to try to take full custody? Not if you demonstrate that you can provide a safe, stable environment separate from Walsh and his legal troubles. Vincent's expression remained unreadable. But understand this. If you ever again place our children in a situation that threatens their well-being, there will be no second chances. As Vincent drove away, leaving Audra standing alone in the moonlight, he felt no triumph or satisfaction, only the cold certainty that justice had been served, not by courts or laws, but by his own hand. Because Vincent Keller had always understood a fundamental truth: true justice wasn't blind. It was calculating, patient, and when necessary, utterly merciless. Chapter 9, Bedrock. 6 months later, Vincent stood on the observation deck of his newly completed office tower in downtown Boston. The building represented Sentinel Shield's expansion beyond security services into secure architectural design, a venture that had doubled the company's valuation. From this height, he could see the lighthouse in the distance. The once prestigious address was now surrounded by construction equipment as extensive renovations addressed its structural deficiencies. Most of the original residents had fled, accepting losses on their investments rather than risking their safety. Brennan Walsh had pleaded guilty to multiple charges of fraud, bribery, and safety violations. His sentencing was scheduled for the following month, with prosecutors recommending 15 years in federal prison. His business empire had collapsed completely, with creditors fighting over the remains. Preston Jewelers had survived, though with significant restructuring. Philip had proven himself a capable leader, restoring the family's confidence and stabilizing the business. And Audra, she had moved into a modest apartment near her mother's estate. After initially fighting the supervised visitation requirements, she had eventually accepted the restrictions and focused on rebuilding her relationship with her children. She had found work managing a small art gallery, a return to her first passion before the jewelry business had claimed her. Vincent's phone buzzed with a message from Barrett Reese. They've arrived. He took the private elevator to the building's secure residential level, where his new penthouse occupied the entire floor. The children had rooms decorated to their specifications, with Leo's featuring a space theme and Nora's designed around her growing interest in architecture and design. Both children rushed to greet him as he entered. At 11, Nora was showing signs of the poised young woman she would become. 7-year-old Leo remained energetic and curious, though the events of the past year had matured him beyond his years. "Dad, can we go to the simulator room?" Leo asked excitedly, referring to the advanced training facility Vincent had built for Sentinel Shield employees and occasionally allowed the children to use under strict supervision. After dinner, Vincent promised. "Right now, we have a guest." Philip Preston sat in the living room, examining architectural drawings spread across the coffee table. He rose as Vincent entered with the children. "Uncle Philip!" Nora hugged him enthusiastically. After the children had greeted their uncle and been sent to wash up for dinner, Philip turned to Vincent with a serious expression. "The papers are finalized," he said, sliding a document folder across the table. "The family trust is established with both children as beneficiaries. Regardless of what happens with Audra's future status, Nora and Leo will have their Preston heritage secured." Vincent nodded appreciatively. Despite the complexities of the past year, he and Philip had developed a relationship built on mutual respect and concern for the children's welfare. "Eleanor asked me to convey her approval as well," Philip added. "She believes you've handled everything with appropriate restraint." Vincent's lip quirked slightly at the careful phrasing. Eleanor Preston understood exactly what he had done to Brennan Walsh and Audra. She neither condemned nor celebrated his methods, but acknowledged their effectiveness with the cool pragmatism that had preserved the Preston family through multiple generations. "There's another matter," Philip continued. "Audra has completed the court-mandated therapy program. Her counselor recommends gradually transitioning to unsupervised visitation." Vincent had anticipated this development. "I have no objection, provided she maintains appropriate boundaries regarding Walsh." Philip nodded. "She's filed for divorce. Given his incarceration and financial ruin, it should be straightforward." As they discussed practical arrangements, Vincent reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The revenge he had orchestrated had been complete and devastating, yet he felt no particular satisfaction in Audra's continued struggles. What mattered was that his children were safe, their future secure, and the threat Walsh had represented was permanently neutralized. Later that evening, after Philip had departed and the children were asleep, Vincent stood on his private terrace overlooking the city. Barrett Reese joined him, handing him a glass of whiskey. "To successful operations," Barrett said, raising his own glass. Vincent nodded, taking a measured sip. "Has our friend in Miami made contact?" Barrett smiled slightly. "Right on schedule. The funds were transferred to the offshore account this morning. He believes his identity remains completely secure." "Good." Vincent gazed at the city lights below. "Prepare the initial intelligence package. We move when his daughter's wedding is announced." Barrett raised an eyebrow. "Another wedding? You have a flair for symmetry, sir." Vincent didn't respond directly. The man in Miami, a corrupt shipping magnate who had once tried to sabotage an early Sentinel Shield maritime project, had no idea he was next on Vincent's carefully maintained list of individuals who had crossed him professionally. The man's future son-in-law had already been compromised, unwittingly becoming a key piece in Vincent's meticulous plan. Because while the situation with Audra and Walsh had been personal, Vincent applied the same principles to all aspects of his life. Identify vulnerabilities, develop contingencies, and when necessary, execute without hesitation or mercy. "Dad!" Leo's voice came from the doorway. He stood in pajamas, clutching his dinosaur toy. "I had a bad dream." Vincent's expression softened immediately. He set down his glass and crossed to his son, kneeling to meet his eyes. "Want to talk about it?" Leo nodded. "I dreamed about that man, Mom's husband. He was trying to take me away." Vincent placed a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "That can never happen, Leo. He can never hurt you or anyone